Welcome to The Rendezvous, the exclusive interview series of One Way Pal. Today, we sit down with Mahesh Harilela, a member of one of Hong Kong's best-known families, the Harilela family, which was originally from India and now rooted in Hong Kong for nearly a century, to talk about a topic that sounds almost futuristic. Are Hong Kong's wealthy families now investing in space? From generating impact investment to space research, from public-private partnerships to Hong Kong's role in wider Chinese space ecosystem, Mahesh has a vision that goes far beyond traditional property and hospitality. And here we go with the interview. Well, thank you, Mahesh, for joining us.
Thank you very much, Raymond.
Well, should we start with something small, like something personal first,
Sure.
so that our audience will get to know you more?
Sure.
Yeah. Let's say, for example, what do you do if I follow you for a day? How do you start your day?
If you followed me for a day, you may end up quite drunk. One of my things, I get up at 6 every morning, and I spend the first 3 hours of the day for my personal use. Exercise and reading, catching up with news, information that's happening around the world while you're sleeping. But the evening is where I sit down and I need, again, time for myself to catch up in the day, and I'll open up my whiskey and sit down and have a drink. And that helps me to calm myself, to actually recapitulate on what happened during the day, what's been happening, and try to adjust the thinking of how we can manage our future.
So you're not a night owl?
No, I'm not. It's changed when you're young and no longer young anymore. As much as I try to pretend I'm 29 years old, I'm not.
So you were used to be a night owl in that sense?
I used to be 29.
You're still 29. So let's say, well, you see, a lot of these successful entrepreneurs, if I may call you that way, emphasize physical and mental discipline. And obviously you show quite a very disciplined life. Do you have, well, other than what you've told me, any other habits like meditation, exercise, or something less conventional?
Exercise, yes. And again, there's so many different forms of meditation. So you relieve yourself of any of those things that are just noise, the confusion, the things that may bother you but are not really pertinent or relevant to your whole life. And then you understand your values. Family first, your work is second, your children third. And from that, what you want to build going forward. So the few things that I have to do is really look after my health as much as I can. And with the help of whiskey, of course.
Well, so that means you are not just a very disciplined person, but you probably would be not quite attached to your phone, right? A lot of these days, a lot of people are attached to their phones, like they hold the phones like 24/7. So you're not that kind of a guy, right?
Well, I'm not dead scrolling, as you would call it. It's really to try to read or see what's going on with the world. And when you're in the business world and you're in the family world, family council convener is dealing with family matters, is dealing with the family situation. And that family situation, there is no cutoff time. There's no 9 to 5. It's not, you close the phone at 5 p.m., but it's always constantly on. My 3 children live overseas as well. My 3 daughters, they're all grown up. And they call me, whether one lives in New Jersey, she calls me in the morning. The other 2 live in Europe, and they call me in the evening. And it's nice to hear their voice and, catch up with them as well. So my habit is that if I'm home, and which is I like to be home, I really do enjoy being home, I need my peace and quiet. I'll switch on the television. That's the background noise. It's the white noise, so to speak. And that just helps me to listen to the background, see what's going on, whether it's English channels, Chinese. But when it comes to 7:30, I have to watch the news. I have to watch the TVB news. That's something that helps me to really capture some of Hong Kong's local information as well. And whatever you read from different newspapers or different magazines or publications, it's always good to just settle down and focus on something else.
Well, you said TVB, so it's not Pearl, which means
it is Pearl.
Pearl.
It is Pearl.
Oh, okay.
It's 7:30 headlines, right? The news headlines at 7:30. And because I'm, speak English and my Cantonese is not that great, it's different when you have a conversation in Cantonese with people versus listening to the news, because that's more literal. It's much more structured. And I wasn't raised in a Chinese school, so I don't understand the language in its depth of what is really being said. So English always helps.
Well, let's say, if you could just forget about your responsibility for let's say, a short while,
Yeah.
what would you want to do?
What do I want to do? I think the question really we have to ask is why are we here? What are we meant to do? What is the goal and what do we fulfill our lives? How do we find what is really the purpose of our lives? And, going out and saying, I want to be rich, I want to earn money. And when you have it, what else do you have? What else do you look for? And family is very, very important. And what's more important for our family is what Hong Kong has meant for us. It's really given us the opportunities. Our wealth generation started in the 60s, and it happened by chance. We didn't become hoteliers just because we said there's a property, we should buy it. It was actually the property in which our retail shop existed that the owner said they were leaving Hong Kong and wanted to offer us a chance to get involved in the business. And reluctantly, the family members, my father and his 5 brothers, said, okay, we'll give it a shot, but we're not going to do this alone. We're going to have 2 other partners that come with us. They know how to operate it, but let's try it. And from that, it just springboarded us from custom tailoring, from trading, into now hotel multinational asset management company. And that has changed. So that was created by Dad and his elder brothers and his younger brothers. They kept that unity together. But I'm born into that. So I never really participated in that hotel asset management activity. With that, I'm just a steward. I'm just looking after or trying to create a policy that our family could actually align with, knowing what the struggles they went through to where we should be in the next 100,000 years. We're a 103-year-old family. Well, 104 now. 104-year-old family, 97 years in Hong Kong. This is our home. This is everything that we have. It's everything we know. And this city has looked after us, and I think it's also our duty to try to give back to the city. So we have philanthropy, we have actions that we do, we have our foundation that we support education in universities, as well as awarding heroes of Hong Kong, and the ethnic minorities and mental health issues and exercise. So we do all of this. But the question you ask is, what would I do or what do I do? Is to try to look things on the bigger picture. One is knowing where we've come from, understanding where I sit today and what is my responsibility. And then what do I see the vision of Hong Kong going forward? And I look at Hong Kong, and this city it's just a magnificent city. But in some of the context, I think we're missing some of the things that we could actually attach ourselves to. And in doing so, in understanding that, maybe I can lend myself to be that voice to the areas which are not being seen or thought of as potential sustainability of Hong Kong as well. It's a great city, right? So,
well, you consider yourself a steward when you were talking about this.
Yeah.
What's your vision then?
For
the family.
For the family, it's continuity of legacy. Now, we know that we're 165 family members today. Oh. So that's quite a large family. We emanate out of one house in Hong Kong. And this is our home. It's not India. We don't look back to India because our family migrated to Hong Kong. But in this context is that if to sustain a family of 165, knowing that potentially we could be 300 members in the next 30 years, we know that family members will move. My 3 daughters will live outside with their husbands. But what's the attachment they can take from our family? The name is great. We have a lot of respect in Hong Kong. We give back as much as we can back to society. But what is it that my children, our children going forward, can attach themselves to what the family really stands for? And with that, how are they going to behave and to grow in wherever they may be in the rest of the world?
Sounds like you're more like a Chinese family in a way.
Well, we're very similar. I think Indians and Chinese are much more similar than geopolitics allow us to be, right? So that is in itself a bifurcation of individual needs and rights rather than the collective of what this world actually needs to look at. And I'm not talking about the structure of politics, but I'm just talking about humanity in itself. How do we move forward? How do we work together? How do we collaborate? And why is it that my color of skin should denote the way I behave with you when having a different color of skin? And we should actually be able to interface, to talk to each other, interact, dialogue, and then build on something that could be potentially the next, maybe SpaceX, for example.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And these are possibilities, but we look at ourselves in a geofence of what we do, then in itself we isolate ourselves and we forget about progress. And progress needs interaction.
So looking ahead, looking forward,
Yes.
which areas or which, say, major areas of investment in Asia or in Hong Kong appeals to you or your family most?
I'm going to try and stretch this reply for you a little bit. We've become very used to, in Hong Kong, the culture of money, right? It is everything we see, everything we speak about, and we listen to. It's money, money, money. What I'm trying to look at is what is the language of sustainable investment? What's impact investment? What does it mean in a world where venture capital and private equity says a return on investment has to be measured on a quarterly basis? And if you don't get your money back at that prescribed identification of returns, then it's a failure, or is it a success? And we look at things that are sustainable impact, where the next generations really believe and anchor. It has to have a little bit of pain capital, hurt capital, long-term capital. And how patient are you in identifying that capital deployment? And then what would be that potential returns? And when you look at that and you say, what exists if we don't actually build anything? And I just find that we're not building much anymore in Hong Kong, or in terms of the investment profile. So you talk about entrepreneurials, right? What are the things that we want to create? And our ecosystem in Hong Kong exists of two parts. And the middle part doesn't exist. And I'll tell you, the startup and accelerating events take place. So you have funds, you have government subsidies, grants that you can get to. There's a private sector, individuals who give you $50,000 to $100,000, and you'll have that runway for 6 months, 12 months. Once you get into growth capital stage, it's very difficult in Hong Kong. And that's what we face, and it's termed as the Valley of Death. Now, Hong Kong has so much money in play. Our GDP is at $450 billion. We have so much US dollars. We have so much at play, so much capital availability, but the gap between the Series A to Series C, well, let's call it B round, doesn't exist. Doesn't exist in the way that we look at that in Hong Kong. We look at it overseas because we look at deployable markets. What's that potential? China's got 1.4 billion people. Let's go to China. Let's build on that. So we don't really address Hong Kong, but Hong Kong's market is, I would say, mature, and it's also saturated. And there's also comes a point of the potential of hyperbolic returns are limited because our population is 7.4, and really our geographic footprint is really tiny. It's 1,000 square kilometers. So how do we use Hong Kong to become the springboard to overseas countries? And how can Hong Kong actually play the part of where China is looking overseas? How do we then infuse the capital availability into that ecosystem that actually gives ourselves what we can call is a proper ecosystem? It exists in the US, it exists in the UK, but it doesn't exist here in Hong Kong, where we really need that growth capital deployment. So how do we create that look? How do we have those conversations? We talk to the banks. I'll give you an example, Northern Metropolis, right? The project's a 30-year program, and they're trying to phase it into 4 phases and build out something. Yesterday, John Lee Ka-chiu says, hey, we need to accelerate and show some real success stories so that becomes an anchor for this project. But when you talk to the banks and they talk to the developers, the big developers of Hong Kong, and they say, okay, look, this is a 30-year program. We want to build it out, but will you, the banks, give us a 30-year project fund? And the banks say, what is that, right? Because all we know how to do is a 10 to 12-year project fund, and if you're not going to get that project up and running the first 12 years, it's a high risk. So developers don't come in. And therefore, the government had to come in with the projects. MTR had to borrow $94 billion to build the railway. And then you had to dip into the Forex Exchange Profit Fund to be able to then anchor some of the initial developments and create that population capacity so that the businesses could come in. And the international businesses are interested. But how do we then create that ecosystem that the funding could come in to support all of these businesses? And it's reliant a lot on government grants. But if the government grants weren't there, the private sector needs to be able to see this, but we have to think a little bit long term, and the banks have to participate.
So in that sense, you're talking about building that ecosystem. Now you have
I think it's necessary. I don't think I can build it.
But you're saying...
But there is something I'm working on which will support maybe one facet of an ecosystem activity.
And you have this very interesting term, impact investment.
Yes.
Well, a lot of people actually put these two into very, extremes.
Yeah.
Either you want impact or you want investment. So how do you
Yes,
put the two
right.
together?
Exactly. I think that's exactly where it gets stuck, is what is impact and what is investment, returns on investment. So impact investment can be constituted, if you look at ESG, you want to look at data, if you want to look at management of data, there are returns on investments that can come from that. If you want to look at how you want to bridge your community to ensure our next generation will have survived the impact of AI so they have jobs going forward, then what is it that you want to invest into that will yield after 5 years, right? So I got involved in building solar plants, not panels, but solar power production. And this is in Europe. In Europe, I've done it with Japan. After the tsunami of Japan, I biz-deved a development for solar project, which resulted in 49 megawatts of solar, which I exited. I went to Italy, I went to Europe, and I said, look, let's build a solar project. And the project takes 6 months for the municipal government to have a look and understand. Then you've got to perform your feasibility studies as a year and a half. But meanwhile, your money is just being pushed into all of this. And after 3 years, when you have your first plant and prove yourself, that's where that return comes in. And then it's a sustainable return for the next 20 years. But your hurt capital is 3 years. And it's not that you build one, because once you build your system, you're able to build more, right? As long as you know how to accelerate land permits and building permits. But it's a painful process. But once you have that, you build a solar plant, it's environmentally protective, it's safe for the environment. You're capturing free energy, putting it back into the system, and the system, the distribution grid, then prices it out to their clients on a demand level, right? Supply and demand level. So we just become the source, right? We're not the pipe, just the source. And that's impact, because we provide green energy and clean energy that goes back to wherever it's distributed, community or cities in the pipeline, right? So how do you then say, what is impact? We know that the projection IRR is going to be at a certain double digit over starting point to the future. How do you then look at, say, I'm not actually in impact investment where my first 3 years is hurt capital. And you think it's budgeted to all the expectations that you would know, but there's always something that comes up. So you have to budget for these tolerances as well. So that's one of the ways to do it. The other thing that I'm looking at is Hong Kong having a space hub, a space office, and that capital that I've actually deployed is not so much into an investment, but it's creating the highway for Hong Kong to have those conversations, that we have to come together, we have to coalesce and come together to be able to build that thesis so that the deployment of investments and the benefits for future generations and for kids can take place.
We were talking about the Space Hong Kong.
Yes.
Well, I guess these days people are all talking about Elon Musk's SpaceX with the IPO.
Yeah.
So now that we understand your family is doing also this Space Hong Kong, what exactly is it about?
Well, it's exactly this. It's creating. We're trying to create a unified center where all the topics of space can take place. The topics. Okay. It's not just a conversation, but the topics where everything can centralize. So our 6 universities are involved in space research. They've created products. We even created a taikonaut that went up in space, right? Yeah. So we have all the capability. We have the cameras. We have the robots. We have what do you call it? the material sciences that are coming out of one of the universities. Wow, it's top notch. But each one is building on what they believe is their research thesis, and therefore that will be the connectivity to Chinese space. So with that, if we create a centralized office, we can share a lot of resources where maybe some of the research departments in one university is not getting the funding. They can come to the center and look at that availability of funding that we connect to the private sector to be able to do this. The government has their own, I would say, grants as well as structures for looking at space, and that's done through the ITIB, right? But the issue with that is that the projects are quite a large volume, and it's always the lowest hanging fruit, or the one that yields the best return back to the government or resource of the government is the ones that's picked, but something that's going to be long-term is actually ignored. And this can be then a public-private partnership where we can actually bring that all together. Now, not only that, it also bridges the ecosystem where I say the valley of death. A lot of the tech startups in Hong Kong go to space, science tech
Science
park, right? Science Technology Park or Cyberport. And a lot of them are given those gifts to have an office and a grant to build themselves. And then once they've done that, a year later, 2 years later, they're still not getting the traction, or they fail and they shut down. And when they shut down, how does STP and Cyberport actually bridge out to the investment community on so many different facets of tech? Because not all investors like all parts of technology. They focus on certain areas that match with their thesis. But in space, we just focus on that. Again, with space, there is what I call upstream, pre-rocket launch, and downstream, which is post-rocket launch. And with that, there's two variable activities. Invest in the technology that's being used, or invest in the data services, the satellites, so you're able to use the data for different purposes. And that's what we need to build for Hong Kong. Hong Kong needs to have this because our capital availability, again, is magnificent with the IPOs, number of IPOs that have come in. We can assist China in their need for capital. China doesn't need capital. Let me get this point across. China's got sufficient capability of capital, but it's a commercialization of it. It's not about military, it's commercialization. That other countries would need what China has. And to do so, Hong Kong could be that bridge. We provide capital institutional activities. We have common law as the practice that would help with the mediation, arbitration. And we can then focus on really helping, assisting other natures with Chinese capabilities, where Hong Kong could play a very active role in finance and data management. And with that, it creates a link to China. They don't need capital. Believe me, they say we don't need it. But it's for those other countries that may need that resource, we can provide that as an instrument of validation that gives them a return on their investments. And the private sector, again, can play with the public sector in managing those relationships.
Sounds like to me it's an Alibaba of space whatever. Is it a mall of everything space related?
It's a model of research, it's a model of finance, it's a model of legal and insurance, as well as future education for the young people of Hong Kong. We have Hong Kong's focused on STEM education, right? It's great. But the avenues of practical application are limited. So how do we then create that value of practical application where they can actually have a center where they can test out certain theses, play with it, test it, have a resource availability? So right now our Space Museum is sadly an aged product. And I don't know when they're going to refund this, but what do we bring the private sector to assist the government in refunding, reconstituting it, so that it also helps with the Chinese visitors who come to Hong Kong, who are unable to go to Shenzhen's technology park, that can then come and have a look at Hong Kong as they're coming in anyway. And there are about, 49 million people coming in from China that visit, and they always go to the harborfront. That's your instant gateway to showing off what China can do and where China's technology is leading it, other than what you can or may not read on social media or news, right?
So do you consider this sector as a high-risk sector?
Of course it is. depends on how you value it. If you're talking about launching rockets, of course, right? Because they blow up, right? There's accidents.
But you're not talking about launching rockets. You're
But
talking
we
about...
shouldn't be talking about launching rockets because China's capability is catching up. It's growing at a rate that's quite fast. And whatever Elon Musk is doing, whatever other companies are doing in US, and now Europe is catching up. Japan just had a launch 2 days ago, or yesterday, successfully launched. Fantastic. But China's accelerating, and it's a game between China and America. But America's costs are a fraction of that of China. And China says we have to be safe, we have to be secure. So insurance then becomes a large premium on rocket launches. Why can't Hong Kong become that insurance hub for them? Because all the insurance companies exist in Hong Kong. Why can't we work on a syndication reinsurance program that allows the insurance companies to carry the risk and de-risk it as well? So Hong Kong can actually play a very strong part in assisting China in the cost of rocket launches. And if we can reduce the cost of rocket launches, that would allow for more participants to get involved in it because the barrier of entry, number one, is reduced, and the cost of launching rockets are reduced. Therefore, more services can be set up into space that will support China and other economies around the world. And China is very forward-thinking. They've got the plan. 5 years ago, they set it up. They've got the new 5-year plan. Hong Kong needs to catch up on this basis. And I've talked with all the government departments, all the way up from the Chief Executive Policy Unit to our Financial Secretary, to our Financial Services Treasury Bureau, to the Commercial Economic Development Bureau, and OASIS, which is the organization of attracting strategic enterprises. And I've talked to all of them, and they all understand that Hong Kong needs this, but the policy announcement from September last year to now has not really resulted in an activation of understanding other than low altitude economy, which is flying drones or having driverless cars, that without our own data set of satellites, we're not going to be able to have that work for us. It's kicking off the ground to activation, which is getting us to have drones travel from China across the border to deliver goods to Hong Kong, but it's only going to service the unpopulated or non-populated areas. But with the minute you want to send Kita, Meituan in between the buildings, these things are going to crash.
Yeah. Well, let me sidetrack a bit.
Yeah. So
Well, your family's core business has long been in the real estate and hospitality.
Yes.
What made you move into the space sector?
Well, first of all, I'm not I don't run the hotel business. We have core competencies. We have our 6 board of directors, of which one is the chair and CEO, and he's doing a fantastic job in trying to drive us into the future. So there's no need to really have one more person to come in and sit as a board. And that's structured, it's professionalized, it's becoming a much more secure development of our business. And as I mentioned, we're 165 family members. Some of us have to go find something to do, right? And someone asked me last week, he said, would you get a job? And I'm saying, actually, I'm unemployable, right? But in that context, is that really I think what interests me is a few things. We talked about this in a pre-conversation. Do I know Star Trek? Yes, I grew up on that. And it was really, the things growing up on that was not just the philosophical standpoint of what they stood for and the way that they behaved as humanity discovering the world, but it's really a lot of technology. Today, our wireless devices exist because Gene Roddenberry decided to have that wireless telecommunicator that they could have. And then how about the long distances of information, right? How do they transfer so fast, so much data in such a short period of time? And that gave us a forward look to say what's possible. 1980s was a great period where we had our first mobile phone, but you have to build the infrastructure. It's not just the mobile phone, it's the infrastructure. Space for Hong Kong can help in assisting to build that infrastructure. It exists in China, it exists in many parts of the world, but we just need Hong Kong to put the pieces together, which is tech, which is ecosystem, which is money, which is regulation, which is arbitration and mediation. And I think Hong Kong has all the parts. Why not?
Another question of mine. Before you changed the name into Space Hong Kong, it was Savvy. Is
Yes.
that correct?
Yes.
Was that about other business?
Yes, it was. It was really trying to look at the medical activities that during COVID was what we tried to look at was how could we assist with supply of medical equipment where the world was needing it. And we're sitting on China's doorstep. But that didn't really kick off, so I just left the company as dormant and decided that better to change it into a partnership where I have 3 other partners who are fantastic. Each has their slot, and one of them is a PhD in commercialization of space. One of 5 people in the world, and who is a Canadian but loves Hong Kong, never wants to leave. And I said, come on, let's talk. You're the smart guy. I'm just the guy who talks too much, and we'll make this happen. And then the other 2 partners came into the fray, and they're fantastic people. Right? One I cannot mention, but the other one was the ex-chairman of the European Chamber, and great connections that he has. And he's put us in front of Xiao Baolong, which really gave us a lot of insight to China's understanding and needs as well.
Well, the year actually marks the 29th anniversary of the Hong Kong's handover to
Yes.
China.
Yes.
So, from your perspective, what has changed most?
I think that people have, after COVID, Hong Kong's finally found its ground to be able to move economically forward in different facets other than reliance on property. And in doing so, the thing that we're doing too much of is thinking about protection rather than about creation. So last week, when John Lee Ka-chiu went to Central Asia and the whole pre-research by the One Belt OBOR activity of Nicholas Ho, fantastic, opening the pathway, Lee Ka-chiu going in, signing the MOUs, inviting them to Hong Kong, which I attended last week on the roundtable discussion with Deputy Prime Minister of Kazakhstan, was very, very interesting that we're actually opening those doors to new economies. And that's what I think when Lee Ka-chiu says we have to look at new ways or new economies that we can actually focus on. I would say that we actually have a lot of economies that we haven't amplified or created the economies of scale that already exist within Hong Kong. And space is one of them. It's sitting right here on our doorstep. So why is it that we're not looking at this rather than just focusing on creating new relations to other countries? And I get that. I think that's groundbreaking, and I think it's really phenomenal that these initiatives are in place and really being the bridge to other communities that haven't seen what Hong Kong is all about. Come to Hong Kong, you fall in love with this place. It's the food, it's the culture, it's the speed in which people work and communicate and actively get involved with. It's fantastic. But how about the things that exist that we still have yet to explore, that we could explore, that could contribute 3 to 5% GDP in a very short time? So we haven't focused on that yet. But if we just talk about building bridges elsewhere, it's necessary and it builds a much larger base of activity. But let's look at the things that we do have. And I recognize that space does present a very large potential of return. And it also becomes sustainable and impactful for Hong Kong's generation, the people of Hong Kong, the ones that are buying smaller properties and much pricier points, that we should be able to then create that hope and aspiration, motivation to move forward. And I think that's very important.
Well, do you actually see competition? I mean, when you do Space Hong Kong, here in Hong Kong, you see any competitions around?
In other countries around the world?
No, in Hong Kong. Or maybe in Asia.
Well, I'm not here to compete. I'm here to create the ecosystem. What I'm proposing is the ecosystem. So I work with the universities. I have those discussions. I work with the chambers. I work with the business council. I work with the charities that exist, aviation charity. We try to come up with a concept on how we should be able to legislate that Hong Kong can be the safeguarding of Chinese tech, that means IP protection, that we can ensure that the data is not really being siphoned off for illicit purposes, that we can actually work together as a coalition to ensure that Hong Kong can act as that Go Global initiative with China, which we're trying to do. And that helps to enrich the GBA area as well. And then how do we move forward with that momentum of a bridge to other ASEAN nations, other Asian countries, and rather than just talking about geopolitical conflict. And then if we talk about the next big economy being India, how does Hong Kong act as a soft landing to what India's perception is of China, and possibly vice versa? I think less so vice versa, of the latter than more of the current, because mainstream media really takes a lot of influence, provides a lot of influence to the regular public, and it's going to take time for that to change. And I'll give you an example. 3 weeks ago, I invited 10 PhD students, 12 PhD students from JNU of India, Delhi, Jawaharlal Nehru College, University, who study in geopolitics of India-China relations. And when they came to Hong Kong, they went to China and they came back and they've written things on LinkedIn, said the concept of what we understand in India and what we saw are two different worlds. And that's fantastic. So can Hong Kong act as a soft landing to build those relationships and then quell? And it takes time, but it also anchors a very large potential economy that's going to exist. We should do the same with Malaysia. Love what's happening with Malaysia. Do the same Indonesia. And hopefully, build that bridge to Philippines and rebuild what we had with Taiwan. We used to have it with Taiwan, right? Yeah. Up until 2014 and things started changing. But it's a soft power, it's a soft connection. Hong Kong can do that because maybe we use money as that common denominator rather than, we talk about geopolitics, which is a very large facet of our discussion these days. But what do we talk about that common denominator? I'll help you enrich yourself, and let's help us to enrich it and create the win-win-win that China always talks about, right? And that's what we should be focusing on.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
That becomes, I think, impact and sustainable for Hong Kong to continue post 2047.
Well, Hong Kong's going to have its first 5-year plan.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So what areas do you think the government should pay attention to?
I'm going to say space first and foremost. It's hard to say. I think what they're doing is quite interesting in terms of the financial market with gold, for example. We have that site at the airport, which is going to be a storage ground. It's a part of the de-risking, I believe, of really the peg threat of how U.S. has used finances as a threat against the rest of the world. And I think that if we can find our own security involved in that, I think that's very interesting. And I think go for it. Put all your effort into ensuring that Hong Kong has a gold reserve, and then how the Hong Kong dollar, whether it's the fiat or whether it's the digital currency, would be able to attach to that, would then create that de-link of sanctionable activities. The other thing I think we need to look at is data management, data protection. Hong Kong has a lot of cybersecurity hacks, a lot of leaks, and we're susceptible to that, and we've done very little in maturing ourselves to understand those global risks. So why isn't Hong Kong set up a data security hub? And then also with this amplifies with the Northern Metropolis on the data center that China's setting up, is how do we then utilize that to ensure that the sovereign protection of Hong Kong's data is managed in a facility that we can control. The only problem with Hong Kong is the cost of electricity. We're 3 times more expensive than Shenzhen. And we're controlled by 2 powerhouses, which are fantastic, but the cost of electricity is expensive here. So how does data, utilize energy? It's very, very costly. And with that, then you have the issues of carbon footprint. So I say, let's send up a satellite, and then we can measure where our carbon footprints are in Hong Kong, and then we can look at how we can mitigate and reduce, or even price it. And if we can price it, then we're able to then create a value return that comes back to the investors, the public, private, or just the private sector to underwrite that. There's a lot of, so I think come back to your question, other 5 years, I think we've got an aging population, we've got a housing issue, we've got education, I think needs to be addressed as well, because I think a lot of the children that have gone to universities are finding out that their job opportunities are being reduced. If we look at the GDP, 40% represented by the financial industry, that's 100,000 people employing 2 million people, but it's the 100,000 that make those decisions. How do we then create that utility for these young people? blockchain was a great aspiration for them. Now it's KOL, and now it's, I don't know what's the next great thing, but I'm sure somebody's going to figure that out to see what's the next best thing for Hong Kong. But in terms of sustainability and giving hope for our youth, this is our land, this is our people. There's the indigenous and there's the migrants. There's the transitories, people who come and make their wealth and move forward. But they're still part of this. Now, when you go overseas and you say you're from Hong Kong, what do people say? Right? I mean, if you go to the US, they say, oh, you're Chinese, you're part of China, you're oppressed. But actually, it's the food culture, it's the connection with the people, and it's really about, if they do understand it, that we don't have the restrictions that press are really saying that we have. We're freedom of mobility. We can say the things that we want to say, unless it's really something you want to get yourself in trouble. And I'll give you an example. One person in the US said to me, oh, Hong Kong is oppressed and it's suppressed, I said, what do you want to do? You come here, what do you want to say? He said, no, I want to come here and I want to protest. I said, no. You're saying that wherever you want to travel in the world, you want to go protest? Why don't you just protest in your own country? You have your own issues. Protest against homelessness, high taxation, the high cost of goods, inflationary pressures, your transport costs. Don't come here to protest about us, right? Because we're living it, we're loving it, we're enjoying it. We have our freedom of mobility. You tell me that if 7 million people tomorrow wanted to buy an airplane ticket, our government's going to say no? It's not going to happen. If China has 300 million people traveling, 99% come back to China. The 1% go for overseas jobs and studies and other things. If we really are that bad, then why is it that you want to come and protest here when you have restrictions? If you go to a bank and you want to withdraw your own cash, you have to give reasons for taking out your own cash. I want to go out and take $1 million out of my bank. You say, sure, what notes do you want?
So how would you see yourself as an Hong Kong Indian? Should I use that word?
I think Hong Kong used to be that we were all Hong Kongers. Now we've become diverse in ethnic groups. And that ethnicity, if we looked at us, in the 80s, the Indians contributed 30% to Hong Kong's GDP. It was fantastic. It was an export-driven environment, and then finance came and took over. But today, some of the terms of ethnic minorities are quite kind of condescendingly derogatory. And it puts people in the negative attribute. Yeah. And this is where the parties say Hong Kong has stories to tell. It's people like us that need to stand up and tell our stories and understand that, perhaps that in that story you understand that our life of Hong Kong, our community engagement has always been for the people of Hong Kong. Maybe that could change some of the thoughts that they have, some of the relationships and negative experiences that they have. And maybe it'll change some of the asylum seekers or the people who are coming in illegally or finding illegal methods to stay in Hong Kong. Maybe it'll change for them to become activated, to become performative. And I fear that if we continue along this ethnic minority degradation, this population that's having us who are having children, and whereas Hong Kong Chinese are not having children, we're going to either become a tax burden to the Hong Kong population, where welfare is going to be very expensive for the government to manage. So we have to look at things on how we can encourage and build up the population, the diversity of this population to be able to grow. Now, the other thing could be said of the foreigners, the white people or the Westerners who are here, considered as expats. And if they're expats, then why are they looked higher and then the rest, the different people below? Then how about the 55 ethnic minority ethnic groups of China? How about them? How do you differentiate one person from China? We're Hong Kong. Do we say, oh, you're from Beijing, you're not part of us? Actually, we all are, right? We're part of the same. And if we have the right goal and the right ambition, I think Hong Kong would find that prejudice or racism actually then disappears because we're all helping each other out. And that's something I find quite amazing in China. When I talk to people in China, they collaborate. I did a keynote for my US university last June. And I had there 100 people from different age groups at that event. And one of the Chinese people said, I'm building this business and I'm trying to do that. 50 hands came up and said, how can we help? And in Hong Kong, we say, I want to have a conversation. I can't get 6 people in the room, right? So maybe we just have to change a little bit. Look at collaboration. A piece of a small pie is better of a pie, a big pie, a small piece. Many small pieces add up. And I find that the next generation of Hong Kong, the second generation, really care about collaboration. They're saying, I want to try different areas. It's a de-risking element as well, right? I'll try and invest in different areas. I'll go through the process, due diligence, and I'll make sure that I'm correctly aligned with the philosophy and the behavior of the startup or the business, and I'll move forward. I'll invest into it, but a little bit is better than a lot of maybe nothing. And Hong Kong, if the second generation is changing, we should be able to collaborate together and understand how that works.
So Mahesh, with rising political tensions, say for example in the Middle East, things like that, how are you going to change your investment strategy?
The interesting thing is that Middle East, the issue of the Middle East has actually moved a lot of capital into Hong Kong. And in one part, that's a good thing. I don't know how sustainable that is, because once the Middle East comes back, the capital will flow back. So what exactly are we presenting in Hong Kong for that investment thesis? What is that? Is it the Chinese play? Is it possibilities of that? So in family offices, the few issues that we looked at is, on my perspective, is that we've been too focused on China. We need to build bridges with other countries. I love Kazakhstan. I think India is a good possibility. I haven't gone to India. I've traveled 8 times in my life, so I really don't know. But Indian people who've come here have shown me the things that they're creating. It's mind-blowing. And they come here because the capital capability from Hong Kong, it's faster and it's easier. But the question is, how do you secure it over there? So what's that bridge Hong Kong can build? Geopolitics takes up a lot of time. It's a 30% weight on your investment gearing. How would you look at that? So if we look at long term, it's very hard to look at it. When you look at short term, you say, what are my liquidable events and how would I recover from that? The other benefit is, can you tokenize those investments, the long-term investments? Could you find a different way to be able to secondary sell? And that's an interesting thing, that if Hong Kong now has that regulation and we have our 2 stable coin issuing capabilities, can we now tokenize those investment tickets, so to speak, into a token that would then be able to sell to qualified investors, to be able to flip it much quicker. But I think geopolitics, I really don't know where the world is going. I think there's certain people screaming murder. They want to remove or cause pain to countries that deem to have created the conflict when actually it was instigated by other powers. It's hard to read. I think Hong Kong has a great geopolitical center that out of HKU, that they're studying all these different facets, and it's being looked at as a very serious player as it brings in Americans, it brings in Indians, it brings in other countries. So we're getting Hong Kong to become that hub. Hong Kong Investment Family Office can use that resource to be able to understand what those risks are. Private bankers that are helping to manage your investment activities, some banks are very restrictive to their products, whereas other banks are open to you introducing those products. And that's also very interesting. So you look at your liquidity event, what kind of risk you want to play into that, and then you deploy your capital. So you'll hedge it in various different formats. Gold was interesting, but it's now, as the recent drop as well, I'm not so sure. Is it going to be cryptocurrencies? It's gone professional, it's great, and no, yes, it's bad. Is it Bitcoin or is it Hong Kong stablecoin, right? How is that going to be your de-risk? So it's hard to say what a lot of the families are doing, but some invest into new projects, new tech. Some would invest into structured products that exist and from reliable people. Now, interesting date. Well, I think it's irrelevant to the question, but I think Hong Kong as an ecosystem for family offices. The family offices, mostly second gens, they really have a very different thinking from what my father had as well, right? And that's going to change the way that capital is deployed. I'm very much involved with them. I love talking to all these second gens. I learn a lot from them, and it helps me being the old man in the room to understand how young minds are thinking. But I have to share with you, super intelligent, super capable, and really thinking very long term. It's no longer just about my 3-month return on investment. So I think what Hong Kong needs to build and what we've propositioned is that we need to run this as a public-private partnership. And we're going to build this, and it's been documented and presented in a white paper to the government, that we will structure this in a build, operate, transfer environment.
Oh, okay.
The question that Hong Kong needs to put up, which Beijing has told us, is that we need a government body in Hong Kong to send a letter to say which government body, bureau, would take that responsibility. And once they send that letter, which we told these where they can go, then China will open up the gateway, which is non-military, and it's 5% of their space business that Hong Kong could actually capture and be involved in. 5% will help quite as considerable. It's about $100 billion value right there, right? And what's the right look? We have tons of data. Then we can talk about satellites going to space, where Hong Kong can become that data center for the rest of Asia as well. So it needs that government input. It needs them to send a letter. It needs them to commit on that public-private partnership by way of the BOT, build, operate, transfer. We will do it. And it de-risks the government that if they fail, if there's a failure, the government's not embarrassed. We're the ones. And if I'm going to put my family's reputation at stake, 104 years, family, 97 years in Hong Kong, I'm willing to gamble. I'm willing to make that gamble because I believe firmly this will be a great gateway for Hong Kong to play with, a great new economy for Hong Kong to actually build on and develop.
Well, my most sincere
goodwill, good wish, good luck.
Good luck, good anything, good whatever.
Yes.
To your vision.
Thank you.
To your business. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. After speaking with Mahesh, what stayed with me most was not just his or his family's ambition, but how deeply rooted his family is in Hong Kong. In many ways, he struck me as more Hong Kong than Hong Kong itself, not because of where his family came from, but because of how he thinks. Mahesh's ideas are always filtered through one question: what is best for Hong Kong? What also surprised me was how much his instincts sounded like the concerns and conversations you hear from many Hong Kong people. Population, social stability, opportunity for the next generation, and even the anxieties around asylum seekers and who this city is really for. That is what made this interview so interesting to me. Mahesh is not just talking about space, he is talking about Hong Kong's future, and he is trying hard to make sure that the city has a good one. So I'll see you next time.